right. We are on
Hi,
YouTube Live.
my name is Tripti Thakur. I'm the founder of The Stylish Closet. It's a free wardrobe platform service to help you style the 80% of clothes that are sitting in your closet that you're not wearing. I'm excited to be part of the Fokcus group, and I'm going to hand it over to Stephen to talk about today's class.
Awesome. Thanks, Tripti. So today we got an exciting session planned. So I know that we kind of threw a city highlight for those of you who, tune in weekly, to our channel last week. And so wanted to kind of talk about that, do kind of a live Q&A session with, myself, Kurling, Johanna, just to kind of hash out a lot of the things to expect during city highlights, what they are, what to expect, and what you'll see as this series kind of progresses month to month. But as always, if you're tuning in, on YouTube, feel free to give us a like. Feel free to leave a comment below, share your thoughts. We want to learn from you as much as you might want to learn from us. And all the interactions we get with videos like this help push it out to more people. So it's a good way for those watching to give back to the community. But I will hand that over to Kurling.
That's great. I was alluding to the cohort, like Johanna, you took that one class, that kind of second nature class, that presentation class. I've been learning so much from you on how you like relay information or communicate information and stuff like that. So thanks for mentoring this morning of how you want to kind of go with this kind of city highlight kind of primer for groups. So I'll let you start. I know we're going to just kind of maybe act 1, act 2, act 3. I love Shakespeare. I love all these type of theater kind of aspects. So I know that's part of how we'll frame it.
Yeah. So I think let's frame it as like what's city highlights, and then we'll talk about what to present, and then we'll talk a little bit about storytelling and then receiving feedback, and then we can maybe wrap up with how do you participate in city highlights and who's it available to. Does that sound?
That sounds good.
Good.
You want people to type in the chat any questions along the way, or what do you think?
Sure. If you have questions along the way, pop them in the chat. And I think Stephen and Kurling are pretty solid at watching the chat, even if I'm not. There's one right now. Where did the term city highlight come from? I think Kurling, you should tackle that one.
Well, I think the one thing when we first started, like I said, so you guys know, we started a lot of things with Apple, and they would have these kind of launches. Each city they would launch. They'd be launching like either like in a part of China, or they'd be launching in LA and stuff like that. And they said each time you're in a city itself, you launch it in a way that you're helping the community, right? So we had all these dialogues on like, how do you help a community and how do you help a city? So that's how the city word came part of it. And part of it was the fact that we were launching whole cities of great startups we felt like were the best of that city. And we create these city launches. So there was these huge events at the Apple store. We did a few in LA, did a few in San Diego. And so there was these city launches. But we actually decided that it'd really be good to have this. I'll use what Johanna would say, Johanna Pantages would say, this personalized experience. So let's scale it down, and let's make a city highlight, just one group that we're going to be launching and highlighting, right? And give them as much love as possible. So that's how city highlight kind of came about.
I think recently we've been talking about this Simon Sinek video that we watched, where he talked about finite games versus infinite games. And I think, across the board, our mission at Fokcus has been to change the way that founders access information and the support that they get through the first 1,000 days and beyond that, so that we don't have folks that are just in programs for a short period of time and then they're kind of on their own, or people that never get to be part of programs. And so I think thinking about it in terms of cities and communities and larger communities really helps us with that's why we name some of our products the way that we do, is sort of tied into that longer term, mission that we have to change, even the demographics of entrepreneurship.
A great question, Johanna.
The other Johanna.
The other Johanna.
Okay, so I want to talk a little bit about what to present. And we sort of had this experience over the weekend that we want to share with you, but we also wanted to point back to our previous 2 videos on Pitch Deck. So there's a Pitch Deck template. I'm not sure. Have we made that available to everybody yet?
I did put it on the cohort channel. I'm gonna
Okay.
pin it so everyone actually has the latest one.
Okay.
So I'll pin it after this call.
Okay, perfect. So there's a template that has all the slides in it that we used during those 2 videos. The first video is 7 key slides to include in your pitch deck, and then the second video is 7 more slides that you can include in your video. So it's sort of the key ones first, and then the optional ones or the supplemental ones second. But Kurling, you wanted to sort of highlight, I think, a couple points from that 2 video series. One is about the billboard slide. So as you think about presenting at City Highlight, I think one of the important things is you're gonna get out of it what you put into it, and taking the time to think through what's on your slides and how polished your slides are is a good activity, but it needs to be balanced with the compulsion to make it perfect and feeling like you shouldn't have your city highlight before you have everything completely polished and ready to go. And I know I particularly struggle with this. Kurling's always telling me, like, get to 80%, get to 80%, and then we got to move to the next thing. And I'm like, but 80% looks kind of icky. And so I'm constantly struggling with that personally. And maybe women struggle with that a bit more than men, where we feel like we really are going to be scrutinized and need to really have all the answers and really have thought through every possible, thing that could go wrong or could happen. And so we may miss the opportunity to get feedback early on because we are fearful about sharing before it looks beautiful. And so I think we need to, so I want to sort of encourage you, like, definitely put effort into it, but don't feel like it has to be perfect, because it's going to change and you're going to get feedback that is going to help you make it perfect. So don't feel like you have to shine it all up and make it perfect. It's not your only chance ever. Kurling always reminds me that on average, most entrepreneurs touch 13 different organizations to get support as they move along their journey. So whatever you're experiencing and with Fokcus or with any other organization, it's not your only chance. There will definitely be other chances, and even within Fokcus, it might not be your only opportunity. Kurling, did you want to? So that's sort of the points about the other sites. Did you have any other key points you wanted to grab from the 2 pitch deck videos?
No, I think you captured the billboard slide. I think that one thing I think, Brianna, I even gave you feedback on this too. Little Kurling always got feedback on the billboard slide first, because that got the first impression. So that first 3 seconds someone sees your billboard, it's that first impression, but it gains you another 15 seconds. and that 15 seconds gains another 30 seconds. So that billboard slide is why we focus on it first. And the second part on that billboard slide was the fact that make sure you're really thinking about the name, maybe the logo and things. And even think about, would I trademark this name, right? Because we have people in our mentor network that help you trademark things. Just because Little Kurling always had that issue, always. I always felt like that was a big problem. Just my name, trademark. So the billboard slide is actually a really good slide to focus on, and you can get other people's feedback on that. You can get your mom's feedback. You can get anyone's feedback on that billboard slide. People can say, does that resonate with me? Okay, senior care company, what's that? Like, those are the things I would say to focus on, and definitely the problem slide and the team slide. Those are the 3 ones I always say to focus on.
Right. So if you can't get all 7 slides in time, like, really super focus on just those 3, because those are the ones that they come early in the presentation, and so people are inclined to give feedback on what they see first, and particularly around the company name and the idea, and whether it's communicated clearly, and whether the name resonates with them, and what the look and feel is something that people, everybody has a response to that and a thought about it.
And the only other thing I would say about the perfect thing, I know your brother at Google always says, at Google they say, like, perfect is the enemy of good. Yeah. Right. So just always think about how that enemy could be for you as a startup, right? So that's a Google way of saying it, but yeah.
For sure. So then the next thing we wanted to touch base on was storytelling. I think that Brianna set the bar pretty high last week with her city highlight, and she really told a story that deeply connected with everyone. People were tearing up and telling their own personal stories, and that was a pretty powerful experience. And anytime that you can tap into that, regardless of how beautiful your slides are or how solid your business model is or how many customers you have, you get people excited about your mission and excited about who you are and what you're trying to accomplish, and they want to help. So anytime that you can tap into that powerful and personal storytelling is really valuable. And Kurling, you had a couple of, did you want to?
Yeah.
When we were brainstorming, we were talking about a couple times that we had that experience.
Yeah, I know offhand. I told Johanna Pantages about how we started with city highlights and city launch. We had a city launch, and we always would bring kind of guest stars in, right? People that actually pitched and ideas. One I was thinking about this morning was a group called Thompson Tea. They make T-shirts that go under your dress shirts, so you're like more comfortable and things of that nature. They were on Shark Tank a little bit before they came with Fokcus, but I think the key part of it was actually their storytelling was really well done. They had no pitch deck at all, but the way they told their story, and part of their story was the traction they made. I think they had a huge amount of sales that first year, and they did a Kickstarter. Part of it was that, but it was part of the story was back like why they actually started the project. And so that got me to thinking about like, you know what, those guys didn't even have a pitch deck. They just had this amazing story about why they started this T-shirt company, right? Like T-shirt companies are very difficult to start, as you guys know. They started it, but they had a story behind it, and that's why the Sharks really loved them, the real Sharks, right? Mark Cuban and them actually had some things there. So the one thing I just told Johanna this morning, I want you guys to just think about storytelling is probably the most important. If you have a slide, or a pitch deck, or no pitch deck, if you're in a board meeting or you're on the plane, it's really the story. And if I would want to get something out of it, city highlights for you guys is actually say, is that story going to engage someone? That's part of it. So that's one thing I was going to add on that storytelling.
You know what I'm thinking about? Remembering that event was talking about to Randy and I can't remember. Anyway, to the guys after to the team afterwards, was how vulnerable one of them had to be in telling their personal story. He said that was a really hard story to tell. It was a little bit embarrassing to talk about. Like I had this problem, and but it's the most powerful story. And I think, Kurling, you and I have been talking recently particularly about people of color. That vulnerability can be really challenging to tap into because you sort of have this tendency to always have your guard up, and being vulnerable can be like a really dangerous thing. And so, as a founder trying to connect with your customers and with the audience that you're presenting to, you have to sort of figure out a way to do that effectively, and it can be particularly challenging.
Yeah, I remember them saying how vulnerable they felt, right?
Yeah,
and
it was a really tough story.
They were pitching all over around after Shark Tank. They became famous, but we made them talk about their story. Yeah, and they were like, right. So
still hurt every time he told the still tough story to tell, but it was the right story to tell, and it was the thing that really made you understand the product and get you on board. But it was still like a hard story. It wasn't a hard story to hear; it was just a hard story for them to tell.
Yeah.
And I think you have to find that balance too. We've heard some pitches that are hard stories to hear. And sometimes if it's a hard story to hear, that you lose your audience because they start processing like this experience that you just shared with them, and they can't listen to the rest of what you said. So you do have to, that's a little pitfall that you got to watch out for.
And one way I get around that, to get that balance, Joanna, I found out, is if I like pitch it to you or pitch it to Steven and get their feedback on it. So you can pitch it to
I tell you like, oh, that was a little uncomfortable, or like, oh, I know that was hard for you to tell that story, but great. Right.
Yeah, that's great. That's great. Like we
definitely want to tap into that. And I think we're going to do a whole show just on storytelling with some examples and some tips. So stay tuned for that. And I won't fill in all the content from that one.
That's great. So I know Act One was kind of presenting, right?
what
The
to present.
slide, right? Act Two is the storytelling. What's
And
this
I guess I skipped part of Act One, huh? So should we loop back to talk about the demo piece? Do we have enough time?
Yeah, I think we can talk about that. I think it's going to be help out. I think it will help out some of the founders what you did and what you
Okay.
worked on. Let's do that.
So recently we were updating some of our messaging and as we shift focus to our customer at Fokcus being more of a program that supports entrepreneurship rather than directly entrepreneurs. We still super passionate about helping entrepreneurs and want to help them, but they're probably not like the person who pays us for the services most of the time.
Yeah.
And so we've been shifting all of our marketing rather than directing it to the value proposition for the entrepreneurs to the value proposition for the programs that support entrepreneurship. And then also we're discovering that mostly we want to help and sometimes those organizations view us as competition. And so we've had to really think through our messaging around how we talk about we're going to help you not compete with you. And we're going to help you connect better with each other. So we were trying to put together a product demo and thinking through how to do this. And I think we spent like 2 days trying to piece together some video footage, and we spent like a whole day like writing a script. We had to keep it within 90 seconds, and it took a long time to like, okay, I have 270 words, like which words can I take out? Okay, can I take that whole point out and still have it have the same impact? And I know you all can relate to this because sometimes you get only 60 seconds or 90 seconds or 2 minutes. And it like the smaller the amount of time for some reason, like the more time it takes you to prepare it because you have to keep figuring out how to be more concise. And talking faster is not really the solution because that's harder to listen to.
I tried to do it.
I've seen people do that. They're like, I'm like, you should slow down the pacing. They're like, yeah, but then I can't fit it in the amount of time. I'm like, right, but I can't follow all that fast. So I think one of the things that we discovered, as a happy accident was in Canva. Did you want me to share my screen and show it?
Yeah, we'll totally share a screen.
Let me pop it up real quick.
And while you pop it up, I was thinking, Brandon, remember how we were going to have a demo part of your city highlights, right? And we're going to try to figure that out. And demos always they're just tricky and stuff like that. So I told Johanna like, let's do a demo in a way that other founders can possibly do it. And so that's why you can share out your screen now.
So I did this like the content based on our user journey and all the graphic design and everything in about a half a day.
Yeah.
So I'm going to share with you what I did and what I learned along the way. So can you see Canva now?
Yeah, definitely can see it.
Perfect. So let me close this little window.
Sure.
But in Canva, so this is a tool that was primarily designed, I think, to help with social media. And it's free. And if you're not using it yet, I highly recommend that you check it out. It's a really useful and easy to learn tool. And I think, Stephen, you're the one that really got us using it. And then you can even share things with your team. So you can have this set of templates that your whole team can have access to. And so you can see, let me show you just the quick like overview of, so you can see like, here's all your designs, right? And so here's you can see like, here's Brianna's city highlight graphics, right? And you can see like, here's our internal thing on how we do our thumbnails for our YouTube videos. And here's some stuff that I was playing around with. But anyway, so it gives you like your library of your designs as well as a bunch of templates that you can pick from. And then within one particular design, you can have multiple pages. And so I'll have a confession here, which is I like to play games on my phone, and I probably spend too much time doing that. But and a lot of the free games have commercials in them. And at first they were really annoying, but now I almost play the games to see the commercials because they're like these little teeny tiny, really efficient communications about people's companies. And I was like, I wonder if I can learn something from that. And so I got this light bulb yesterday where I was like, I think that I could take the way that that apps from the Apple App Store present like highlights about what their app does and turn that into our demo. So this is the Instagram size story template from Canva. And I took our user journey and I mapped a series of slides to the user journey. And I just made this little template so that you can actually see that I have screenshots from our application that are just pasted onto this background template. And this is not necessarily the cool thing about this is that you can put it together really quickly. It's drag and drop. There's a series of elements here that you have access to that's searchable. So you can do shapes and little doodads and accents and backgrounds and even people. There's all different kinds of stuff in here, but the shapes are the main thing I do. And you can recolor the shapes really easily. Like this is a shape and I can make it, any color I want. And we have a color palette, a style guide where we have a specific color palette we always use for our graphics. And so I can just put in the little code here that makes it exactly the color that we use on all of our other stuff. So that's so this is the framework of what I built based on our user journey. So I just made sort of 10 or 11, I think there's 11 slides now of that tie to our user journey. Kurling, did you want to interject? Because then I'm going to jump to sort of the thing that we discovered that was really cool about it.
No. Yeah, you continue. It's great.
So then there's this option here to animate the way that the screen loads. And I think if I change it, it'll show you.
Yeah, even if you hover over.
There you go. So if I do that, can you see that it changed?
Yeah, definitely.
There you go. And it does that automatically. And then up here, I shared it out with Kurling and he's like, yeah, I hit the play button and it worked really great. I'm like, the play button? What play button? So there's a timing thing for each of the slides. And it turns out that you can just play it. And look, we have a demo. And it walks you through the whole thing. And it just loads. And it's beautiful. And you can download it as a video and put it on YouTube. So we sort of discovered this really easy, painless way to make a video that doesn't require any video editing tools or voiceovers or anything. And because you have the timing for how long each slide is, you have this little summary up here. So if you know you're trying to keep it within a certain amount of time, it's 1 minute and 12 seconds. And the other thing that I happened to stumble on while I was in here is they have pitch deck templates in here. So in Canva, there are blank pitch deck templates. So if you don't like the look and feel of ours and you want to switch over to something else, there's a ton of them that are just free in here. So that's my stuff I wanted to show.
Yeah, and I think that really actually still goes in Act 2, the storytelling, right?
Yeah.
Like, is there a way you can actually do it in a way that for any founder, even if you don't have some of the skills, like John, this wasn't even your first tool. You always use Adobe and all this stuff like that. Oh, yeah. And then Stephen was a great job. I appreciate that, Stephen. Stephen's always looking at what's trending, and Stephen did a great job on just getting us into this Canva mode.
And if you know Photoshop, there is some animation capability in Photoshop, and there's also, you have a lot more flexibility to resize and to crop out, different shapes of things. So, Photoshop definitely is a really powerful tool, and but it's also more time consuming. It would have taken me a lot longer to build this in Photoshop, even though it might have been more perfect.
So one reason why I was telling Johanna, let's just talk about talk about how we do demos. I think demo is a really important piece of a city highlight. Is actually to show like, hey, after you're done with your presentation, and this is what it actually kind of looks like. Let's kind of run through it just so people can actually just get in the mind frame of how the user will look at it or things of that nature. You can still use these assets for your website. So we always want city highlights in some ways will be all reused for your website, for your other marketing material, all that stuff like that. But this demo piece.
We lost Kurling.
And even if your product is not launched yet. Yeah. Even if you're not launched yet. Oh yeah. I'm stable. So
you're stable. I saw you freeze for a second. I was like,
And me and Tripty were having this whole deep conversation about stability, and
Yeah.
we were just talking about that too.
So
Yeah.
speaking of that, one of the things that's really valuable about having a pre-recorded demo and having it available somewhere, especially if you can have it locally on your computer, is that if your internet connection fails or if your demo just straight out doesn't work for some reason, there's some you never logged into it from wherever you are doing your presentation, you want to have a backup plan. You don't want to just not have a demo. So I think doing this little pre-recorded thing that you just have handy just in case is really valuable. Another thing that I've seen people do, it was Dominic. Remember we went to his AI talk from Google, and the internet connection, he couldn't get on the Wi-Fi where he was, from where he was presenting. And so he just was like, oh, give me 1 second. I'm going to turn on my hotspot on my phone. And then it was all fine. So just always remember to sort of have that in your mind, that's your plan B to flip over to your hotspot on your phone and test that ahead of time if you have a hotspot on your phone.
No, that's great. So now we can move to Act 3. We have about 7 minutes maybe to work on Act 3, and that's more.
Perfect. So I think one of the things that we did a whole lot of city highlights. I think we've done over 80 of them. Just at the Apple stores. We used to do them right in the Apple store in public. Kurling, you're still coming in and out. You okay?
Yes, I'm okay.
So I think one of the things that we learned was that people felt really stressed in presenting in public and like in a public space, and at the Apple store, even though it's prestigious, it also, and it was a really friendly, warm environment. They wanted us there. It was very stressful for people, and they felt like they had one chance, and they felt like they really needed to prepare, and they didn't always know what to expect. And Kurling and I always use this word, ambushed. So I think sometimes, especially if you were late to it, like you got stuck in traffic and you were 10 minutes late, you felt like, oh, I only had 1 hour and all these people were waiting for me. And it's very hard to do an effective, thoughtful presentation when you're feeling ambushed or late or stressed out or so much pressure. And so Kurling, you want to talk about sort of the things that you do to sort of just prep people for city highlights, and then we can talk a little bit about feedback.
Yeah, I think part of the prep session is knowing that this is not your only chance.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of the people are saying like, well, I worked so hard on this startup and this is like my only chance. I always tell people that it's not that.
It's not like an investment pitch. And even if it was an investment pitch, it still wouldn't be your only chance. Yeah, you do. And even if it was an investment pitch, it still wouldn't be your only chance. There are tons and tons and tons of investors. Like, use each one as an opportunity to get feedback and to make it better for the next time. So I think he's still there.
What I was going to do is
there he is.
I'll let you continue. I'll switch over. I'll do a Dominic from Google.
You do a
I'll
Dominic.
Switch over.
Perfect. Yeah. So so another thing that happens is that drive to sort of be perfect and to have all the answers and look very competent can sabotage your experience of receiving feedback. So I've really seen entrepreneurs, sometimes people give you feedback of stuff that you already know, or you have expertise in that area, and they think that they're being helpful, but it isn't actually helpful to you. And it's very hard to just sit there and receive that feedback and not say like, duh, I already knew that. And so I think, but that attitude can come across as arrogant, not open to feedback. And so we really try to encourage everybody to really think about how your mindset as you're receiving feedback, that some of the feedback is going to be stuff you already know. And that's okay. And some of the feedback is going to be stuff that doesn't resonate with you, and you're never going to do that. And that's okay too. These people are just trying to be helpful, and they are experts in whatever their field is. So they're really sincerely trying to help, and they can get discouraged and put off if they feel like you're adversarial or you're not listening, or that you have a defense or an argument to every point that they make. And I particularly have this problem where somebody criticizes me, I want to tell them like, I know the answer to that. I thought through that. Like, maybe it didn't come across perfectly, but I can defend it, and that isn't well received. Kelly, you
Yeah,
wanna?
yeah. I was just saying too. Most of the time, though, the we're not sharks. I always tell
Yeah.
people we're fish tanks. So usually the people I've already talked with them, like, oh, I really want to help out
Yeah.
Brianna. That was like Kyle, right? There's some people already came into this situation
Yes.
where they really want to help. So our environment might be better or more loving, but we still want to get you guys somewhat ready for other type of environments, right?
Yeah.
Some startups have came back, or founders came back to me like, man, I had this terrible meeting with this angel.
Yeah.
I had this terrible meeting with this kind of partner,
Yeah.
and they were just drilling me, right? You might have heard of Ty a couple of weeks ago talking about how people are always trying to catch them off guard in meetings. So there is that type of environment in the startup ecosystem, just because people do watch Shark Tank and people do that.
Yeah.
But there's ways that you can actually, as a founder, to mitigate some of those things. And I think that's why we started doing city highlights, so people can kind of see this environment and actually be able to be, it's kind of practice that muscle of getting feedback and being very professional about it, right? I could tell you tons of stories that happened to little Kurling, but I think the main thing is actually what we're trying to do is equip all of our founders to actually be able to get feedback and actually later on give feedback. I think all of the people in our cohort and the people, you all are going to be great mentors as you go through this journey. All of you guys will actually be able to partake some words of wisdom. I know that. And already. The only thing I was going to add to Johanna is I told Steven's been part of the last City Highlights. He's been part of the mentor session we did at Startup Week when we mentored 300 startups in like 3 days. Like Steven's actually, I want to get his perspective on like any lessons learned. Him being as a role of a mentor. Steven, are you okay with that?
Sure. Yeah. Yeah, I would just say, I guess, building off of some of the points you've mentioned in terms of feedback, being able to, let's say, give feedback from a mentor perspective, from an entrepreneur, from a mentee perspective, receive feedback. There was a story that I heard once upon a time on the topic. I know you mentioned the Shark Tank analogy, so I'll use this. So there was an interview that I saw once on Mark Cuban, right? And he was talking about when he was young, going through entrepreneurship, starting businesses, that he started reading books on sales, like to learn how to become a better salesperson, or learn these aspects of how to become a better entrepreneur and better help his team or his business kind of move forward. And one of the things he mentioned was that he might read a book, let's say it's 200 pages, right? And let's say 190 of those pages were, maybe stuff that he knew, or maybe stuff that wasn't even relevant to what he was doing, right? But there might be a 2 or 5 page section that, might have an idea in there that might change the way that he does what he's doing, right? Might bring something that's going to affect him for the next 2 years, right? And so in that same kind of same ideology, you might listen to, let's say you're not even the one doing the city highlight. You're just somebody listening in, right? You're an entrepreneur that, has a venture or whatnot. And you might listen to an hour-long city highlight, and there may be a 5-minute section where you say, wow, I really got a lot from that, right? Or something that they said about Brianna in terms of UI UX, or the storytelling component, having that emotional punch behind it, or whatever it may be, right? And you might be able to take that and completely change the way that you do your pitch, or that you storytell to an investor or something like that, right? And so even though you might have feedback that maybe stuff you heard before, maybe stuff that isn't totally relevant, most of the time in an hour-long session, right, when we have such a broad spectrum of people giving feedback and people having these great different perspectives on things, that there's usually always, at least a little piece or maybe even more that you can take away. So.
No, thanks, Steven.
That's great.
That's good. We have a question. Tripty, you want to unmute yourself? You had a really good question.
Oh, thanks. It was actually Brianna's that I just.
Oh, Brianna. Okay. You got it. Oh yeah, maybe Brianna. Okay, yeah, it's good.
For her. And so when we were talking about the demo, what really should be included in that? Is it And especially given lead time constraints, are we supposed to show like, here's the problem, here's how your solution, is resolved through it? Or are you showing just like, here's a key feature, so here's one of the things that I wanted to show you that's really important that differentiates me? Or is it, and that's to Brandon's point, like key spots? Or is it, here's the story of how we came up with it, here's what we're doing, here are key things about it when it's going to launch, number of people. So what would you highlight in a demo?
That's great. And I always use this word when I talk to founders, Trippy. I say it depends. So if you're actually, I've had about 4 or 5 demos for one company, and sometimes for my energy company, I use the demo just to talk to. It was an energy company, right? Just to talk to some of these energy directors, right? And it looked a little bit different for them, right? The demo had dashboards on how much they saved across the US and Canada, right? It showed that demo for them. But what I actually showed some of the people that were actually going to use this system was to show how easy it is to install, how easy it is to integrate, and show reports for them. So I had for my energy startup, I had about 4 or 5 demos depending on who it was, right? So that's one, right? For city highlights, the demo should actually be something related to the customer. What is that customer's experience with it, right? So I would go from that, just because that will probably help the mentor give you some feedback if he was going to be a customer, or if she was going to be a customer. Like, oh, do I really have to do a full selfie for that? Does that make sense? Right? So I would actually come in from the customer user journey on that, and just do like a small segment of it. In fact, the way I've done it before, Trippy, is the things I was iffy on, the things I might do an A/B testing on, like, I'm not sure if this is going to work. That's the one I would demo, because I would want to get their real feedback on that. Like, I don't think it's going to work. You might get someone who says like, hey, I would use that. And then that's your A/B testing, right? If everyone in C Highlight said, you know what, I like the way that worked, go with that one. And then you can launch that demo out to your customers. So does that make sense? Sometimes I do experimental stuff when I yeah.
So like in Brianna's case, for example, if she was to say, hey, so here's how I would sign up as a caregiver, or here's how I would find caregivers, and then here's how you're matched, and then here are all the prices, here's how you're booked, and here's your confirmation. Would that be what we would show?
Yeah. In a short period of time, I would probably just pick one persona. So I would probably just pick maybe how the host goes through it, right? And actually, and I would probably just pick one persona. Like, she's in a marketplace, right, where there's Airbnb, there's host, and then there's these really nice people who have their mom or dad coming through and want to be loved, right? So I would pick one of those pieces, the persona, and just show that, and then maybe talk about the other. But that gives it more reality, and also, you can use that later on for your dev team and all of them to understand, this is what I want to build. And I've even got some feedback during city highlights, like, that is a great way to go about moving through the system. So I've used city highlights, or told people to use city highlights as kind of like this kind of R&D. Like, if you're going to show something that you're not quite sure on, why don't you show it at city highlights? It's totally safe. Don't show it to Mark Cuban, show it to us, right? So I think that's how I would say it. Does that help out, Trippy? I hope that helped out Brianna too.
Very much. Thank you so much.
I have one more comment on that, because I was struggling with that myself, because I think you're so used to thinking about pitching and telling, like, how did I get my idea, and who's my team, and who are my customers, and what's my traction? And that isn't the point of the demo. The point of the demo is to show that you have an actual product, and for people to understand how it could work so they could imagine themselves using it, right? So if you in my original demo script, I had a whole, like, the first 1 minute out of 90 seconds was about, like, here's our mission and here's what we're trying to accomplish. And I end up taking all of that out, because really what I wanted to show them is, like, if you were using our tool, this is what it would be like for you.
I like that. Thanks, Johanna.
Yeah.
So as we wrap up, I know we want to do speed networking and things of that nature. Any last thoughts, Johanna?
I guess I did have one more thought, that sometimes how you perceive people's feedback isn't the way they intended feedback. So I had a job interview years ago where the person who was interviewing me actually 5 minutes into the interview got up and said, "This interview is over," and left the room. And I was like devastated. I really felt like I blew it that fast. Like, what could I have done wrong in that amount of time? Well, it turns out he had an emergency that he just got notified about, and he had to go deal with it. And he'd already made the decision that he wanted to offer me the job. And so I totally misinterpreted, what that situation was. And so, try to keep hold of your emotional response to feedback that seems really severe, because it might be coming from a place that you don't like, a context that you don't understand.
Yeah, that's great. Yeah, no, I think, and that's kind of like just real talk. Like like I said, we're trying to equip you guys for other environments.
Yeah.
But even in our environment of City Highlights, we've had some incidents, right, where people
Exactly.
right. So even in our environment, we had things. But I think that's just great, just to use this kind of empathy, right?
Yeah.
That's what.
I mean, sometimes you're triggering something that they've already experienced. They're like, "Oh, I'm going to be really hard on you because somebody was really hard on me, and I, or I really messed that up," right? And so sometimes it's coming from a place that's not intended to harm you or to criticize you. It's coming from a different place, and sometimes it's hard to untangle that.
That's great. Trip, do you have feedback?
To that, I would say, and so what, by the way, even if they meant it, like,
Right.
I think both have to exist. One is you have to think, okay, well, maybe they didn't mean that. And the second is, so what? They walked out because they didn't like it. This isn't the guy. There's another one.
Exactly.
Like, I think both.
Love it.
Yes.
That's great, Tripty. I love that. All right. So I know this is good. Joanna, thanks for doing the real talk on this kind of lesson learned. We call it primer. We try to have that part, but we'll probably have another one that's later on too for other things. But I think the main thing is actually we want everyone to be successful. So that's why we move people to launch things. And one of the ways we do it is have this really great, like, supportive environment, city launch. And now we're doing more city highlights. So thanks, Johanna, for going over this, and definitely appreciate that. Stephen, I will hand it over to you. And then what we'll do is we'll close it out, and maybe we have a little bit of time to do speed networking.
Awesome. I'll wrap it up and we'll do that. So for those of you who are watching this on YouTube, feel free to give us a like, leave a comment down below. We want to hear your thoughts on what was shared today. If you have any other questions or comments or anything like that, feel free to leave them. Also, interactions like likes and comments we get with videos like this help push them out to more people. So if you found something super insightful or super cool that was mentioned today, give us a like, leave a comment, because it might push that video out to somebody who might find, something equally as insightful, or might pick up on something that you didn't. So it's an easy way to give back to the entrepreneurial community. But as always, we will see you in the next video.
Yeah, I want to thank the cohort.